And we will formally get started. So hello, everyone, and good evening. Welcome to the Imagine Austin Speaker Series. My name is Natalie Betts, and I am the Circular Economy Program Manager with the City of Austin. We are a partnership between Austin Resource Recovery and the Economic Development Department, and it's our mission in our program to help create an economy that is thriving and vibrant and where every material and product can be put to productive use for the good of people and planet throughout its life. And be productive for as long as possible. The Imagine Austin Speaker Series that we're having tonight is part of an ongoing series of talks presented annually by nationally known experts and thought leaders in subjects like land use, housing, affordability, public health, equity, and sustainability. And at its core, this is an opportunity to promote and implement the Imagine Austin Comprehensive Plan through shared dialogue and mutual learning. City Council adopted the Imagine Austin Comprehensive Plan in May of 2012, and it's the city's 25-year plan for its future. Tonight's event is sponsored by Austin Resource Recovery and coordinated by the city's Housing and Planning Department. So our community has really big goals for itself when it comes to sustainability. We have a goal to reach zero waste by 2040 and really aggressive plans to combat climate change. And doing that really requires collective action. It requires action by government, by businesses, nonprofits, and individuals and families. And individuals and families can help us achieve these goals through your daily habits. So that could be shopping secondhand, taking public transportation, or choosing to repair something instead of throwing it away. And since we're in January and we just started a new year, I know that many of you might have New Year's resolutions about some of the sustainable change you'd like to see in 2021. So maybe one of your goals was to buy less or to learn a sustainable skill. And it's kind of in that spirit of starting off the new year with a happier, greener foot that we are having this event today. And we invited our speaker, Dara Zeicherman, to talk about the intersection of minimalism, zero waste, and meaning in your own life. So that as you adopt those sustainable principles, you can connect them to your values and really make them sustainable for you throughout this year and on into the future. So without further ado, I'll introduce our speaker. So Dara Zeicherman is the owner of the Austin-based business Less Equals More. She's an expert on the intersection between organization, minimalism, and sustainability. And she's also a podcaster, a blogger, and has been a 2018 TEDx speaker. So I will now turn the floor over to Dara.
Thank you so much, Natalie. I just wanted to first start by saying that since we're going to talk about meaning and what makes something meaningful, it means a lot to me that you all joined this session today or this evening. It's meaningful that you decided to take time out of your evening because you found this topic to be important and you wanted to learn and hopefully take action on that learning and do something. The context of what I'll be talking about is really a series of questions. What's important to you? What is really important to you? What are your actual priorities? Not the ones that you think that you should have, you know, the deeper ones. And do your actions, the way you spend your time, the things that you do on a daily basis that you might not even think about, do those align with your priorities? What gives you meaning in your life? So these are the types of questions and investigations to have within yourself. And I'm here just to provide a bit of guidance. So I wanted to first show you a picture, or a series of pictures, I should say, and mention that sometimes, and I think we all do this, we get caught up with the numbers. We get caught up with before and after pictures, and we mistake a symbol for an actual result. So maybe you've seen, in the vein of zero waste, maybe you've seen that like glass jar filled with only the trash that somebody created through the course of an entire year. It all fit in that one glass jar. Or maybe you've thought that kitchens like the ones that you're seeing on your screen right now, that this is what minimalism is all about. Just white spaces that don't even really look lived in. And you never know what's lurking in the cabinets, right? So let's first talk about what minimalism is. I can tell you what it's not. It's not about the specific number of items you have or that you give away. And minimalism doesn't quite have like a concrete uniform definition as it applies to our homes and lifestyles. The term minimalism actually emerged from the design world, right? So again, the white, the sort of simple, clean lines, that's minimalism in terms of design. But here, when we're talking about our homes and lifestyles, it can mean a lot of different things. And for you, it might make more sense to use a term like simple living, voluntary simplicity, intentional living, essentialism, or anything else that feels right. See, the label is not important. The label itself isn't meaningful. It's what's behind it. Minimalism really is doing the most of what you want to do with the least amount of stuff, with the least amount of hectic activities. So you do the most with the least. So it's about efficiency, not wasting time, money, or energy. It's also about focus. I imagine that a lot of you out there are having trouble focusing. There is a lot going on. So when we talk about focus, we're really thinking about what are the important things that you want to accomplish? What are your priorities? And then focusing on these without distraction. So you have to do away with that distraction. That's what minimalism helps you do. So you're addressing the focus from both vantage points. Minimalism, at least the way that I define it, the way I think about it, is that it's not actually about stuff or organizing. It has to do with those things, but that's not what it's about. It's about figuring out what you really care about and following through on that promise to yourself in whatever format that takes. You answer for yourself what you want to achieve in your life, what you want to experience in your life, and create the shortest and most fulfilling and hopefully fun path to get there. So the other piece of this is recognizing trade-offs. That's why it's a little bit complicated. That's why one of the reasons we have trouble implementing minimalism in our lives. Understanding a trade-off is understanding why it's better to do or have one thing rather than another. So as much as I believe in abundance and you can have it all, you can't quite have it all in every way possible. So you have to make some of these trade-offs. And one of the trade-offs that happens in minimalism is you want to have that perfect thing at the perfect moment. Maybe feel like the hero in your current situation or even to yourself. And a minimalism says, you know what, one of the trade-offs here is you're not going to always have the perfect thing in the perfect moment, but we're going to give you the space. You're going to have the space to be creative and adapt and just go with the flow a little bit more. So the other terms that always come to mind when I talk about minimalism is that it's about being intentional. That strips away a lot of those distractions. And it's also about being mindful and being aware. And so we're doing definitions here, so let's move on to what is zero waste. At the most basic level, we're talking about diverting waste from the landfill and making sure it's not incinerated either. Okay, so nothing going to the landfill or the incinerator. But what this involves is a little bit out of step the way that our current culture works, because this involves prevention. It's not buying something that would have to go to the landfill after use. So you have to think about this before you make a purchase or you acquire something. It's also about using products when you do need to use a product, because that's perfectly reasonable. We all need things. But making sure that it's something that can be repurposed, reused, composted, buying used items that can be used again. So it involves a little bit more thinking that our rushed and harried lives typically promote. And we're very lucky here actually to be in Austin with Austin Resource Recovery. And I promise you, they did not tell me to say anything about what they do, but Austin Resource Recovery actually allows us to divert more from the landfill than a lot of other cities in the US. And we also have other recycling facilities here that allow us to recycle many different items. And I saw that they just announced they fully expanded their curbside composting program. And composting is a great way to encourage forethought about what you use and where it goes, and actually partake in the life cycle of an item that you're using. And this is a little scene from Austin Resource Recovery. I just want proof I have been there. I wouldn't say it if I hadn't been there. I had a chance to volunteer, and this is me using the Styrofoam recycling machine. Avoid Styrofoam at all costs, especially if you want to go zero waste. But fortunately, if you happen upon some Styrofoam, there is a way to dispose of it properly. So this is all just thinking about where our items go and the life cycle of an item. So I do encourage you to make a visit there when they reopen. And I like to give you a quick tip. Look up what materials they take and what you tend to dispose of from time to time. Like if you're a big battery user, they take used batteries. And then set up a bin or a bag in your home, labeled properly. Maybe put it near your trash and recycling, like inside your home. It could be in a garage, laundry, utility closet, something where you're going to remember that you put it there, and maybe even do a shorthand list of things that they take. So when you're in that sort of rushed moment where you have something you have to get rid of, you can drop it in that bag or bin. That way you have a place on the ready so to store these items when you're ready to make a trip there. So zero waste, again, thinking in a different way, but for the purpose of avoiding the landfill. And just a note, again, the term on the label so that that doesn't become a distraction, zero waste is an aspirational term, right? It's what we want to get to. It speaks to restoring balance and reducing our dependence on material items, because extraction, production, distribution, and disposal of items that we own has a substantial impact on the natural environment. So it takes into consideration not just where something is from, what it's made of, but where it eventually goes. So keeping in mind that an efficient system, and this relates very clearly to minimalism, efficiency, an efficient system wouldn't have any waste, right? That wouldn't make sense. And nature as a system doesn't produce waste. So zero waste is an aspirational term. If you want to swap that for low waste in your own life, whatever feels most comfortable to you. And which is probably a good segue into creating your own definition. So I really promote this piece of the pie because I can tell you my definition and give you my perspective. There are other perspectives out there, but we're talking about making meaningful choices in our lives. And so creating an adaptation of your own definition is very important, or think of it maybe as an application of a generalized definition to your own life at this point in time, because you will evolve over time. So this is actually really important Again, because we're trying to find meaning. We're looking for meaning and we're employing meaning in our lives. So these definitions and the specifics around them have to relate to your own personal life and where you're at right now. And words can be fluid, not, one size doesn't fit all here, right? So don't let these words be restrictive or discouraging in terms of what's meaningful, but don't flip that on the other side and say, oh, anything goes, anything is minimalism. Still be specific, because being specific is what leads to results. So that's the way to balance this sort of application to your own life and being a little bit flexible, but also being disciplined. So this, I would imagine, brings up the question of, okay, well, why minimalism and zero waste? What I find so, and by the way, I come from a sustainability background. I worked with green buildings for 12 years, green neighborhoods for 12 years. In studying environmental issues, there are very, very few solutions that are solutions. There's a lot of less bads out there, a lot of things that we do that's not as bad as the other thing that we could otherwise do. Minimalism is just a rare concept that allows you to accomplish so much with literally so little. You get to save time, you get to save money, you're less stressed out. Even if you're not an organized person, if you have very few things, you're just going to automatically be more organized, be able to find more things. You're going to be more focused. I mean, you're going to use focus to create your minimalist home and lifestyle, but then you will be more focused within that construct. You'll be less distracted, of course. And this is the kicker, and you're more sustainable. So you can accomplish so many personal goals and be supportive of the environment. So this is, and by the way, when I say sustainable, I'm talking about environmental sustainability, but also personal sustainability. Being financially in good shape, being less stressed out, this makes us sustainable human beings. It makes our lives easy to enjoy and to be our best selves. So that's sustainable, that's long-term, so we don't get burnt out. And then, of course, I'm going to wrap that back. It allows us to focus on meaning. Minimalism is just like a straight shot. So, okay, what is important? What are your priorities? And adopting zero waste practices is one of the most sustainable things that you can do. So the combination of minimalism and zero waste both come from a place of, and again, this is my favorite word, efficiency, and ease of sustainability. I have to say, one of the things I've noticed over the past couple of decades in the environmental movement, a lot of green, eco-friendly, sustainable businesses out there making incredible strides. It's wonderful to see. But I have found that folks find it really confusing to figure out what's the most green or eco-friendly choice is. It could be a little complicated. You're weighing different options. And we have enough decisions to make, right? We all suffer from this sort of decision fatigue. So by adopting these principles, minimalism and zero waste in your life, off the bat, you're being more sustainable. Just like that. And then, yes, when you do purchase things, you want to purchase green, et cetera, et cetera. But even if that idea is a little complex to you, again, adopting minimalism and zero waste can be your focal point, and you don't have to worry about that as much. Now, the one caveat I'd like to make, because I want to be super honest about this, you might find that being zero waste or working towards zero waste doesn't quite meet that save time mark. I list off all those benefits of minimalism. Zero waste might add a teeny bit of extra time, and I'll explain how. Those one-time use little plastic bags you might put a snack in and go on a little trip for the day. And then when you're done, you throw that away. So zero waste would have you use a reusable bag or a little, bento box or whatever, So you would use that, and then when you finished with it, then you'd have to wash it out. So we're adding like 45 seconds to your day. There might be other little pieces of that nature, or like when you go to the grocery store and bringing your own bags, a few seconds here, a few seconds there, right? But this is where the combination of minimalism and zero waste is so great, because you're saving tons of time with minimalism. And I mean a lot of time. Sometimes we forget all the components of having stuff, right? We are actually saving time shopping, putting things away, having things in your life that you just don't care about as much, those distractions, maintaining items, cleaning items. The amount of time you spend on items is quite large. So to wash out a reusable bag once in a while, to be zero waste, as an example, you're still coming out way ahead on the time scale here. And all of this really brings us back to finding meaning and making minimalism meaningful to you in your own life, because there's some individual choices you have to make, and like I mentioned, there are some trade-offs. So what do I mean by meaning or meaningful? We can look at this actually from two vantage points. There's a practical sort of meaningfulness, because remember, we're not making meaning about numbers. I don't care how many bags of stuff you get rid of. I don't care how many items you have after you're done. I don't care how your before and after picture looks. None of that is actually meaningful. But when we're talking about practical meaningfulness, let's use an example. Let's say one of your priorities is to get out of debt. That's something really important to you. That is meaningful to you. So by adopting a minimalist lifestyle and selling a bunch of stuff that you don't want or need, so that you can use that money to help pay down some debt. Maybe you even downsize your home, that pays it down even more. Also, just deciding not to buy new things will allow you to save enough money to pay down that debt. So that's a practical sort of meaningfulness. It's not necessarily attached to a value, although it might be, but that is something you want to solve for. But then there's that sort of step back meaningfulness, like the bigger picture. And defining what that looks like for you will help you maintain minimalism moving forward. Because even if you downsize your life, things can creep back in very quickly. So really understanding your true values and your priorities and goals on a much higher level, like what is your purpose in life? Like these really big questions that might not be as practical as just getting out of debt. But if sustainability, for example, is very meaningful to you, that's going to really focus you in on how you want to adopt minimalism and what that looks like for you. So this is another bit to always keep in mind. Becoming a minimalist or downsizing isn't like a one-time action. It's a way of life, and it's a mindset that can that allows you to evolve with awareness. So not only will your version of minimalism and zero waste not look the same as somebody else's version, but your version will be different than your own version over time, because it's about what you need in the moment. So let me talk about just a few things to consider. To be effective and efficient at downsizing your home, you'll need to kind of create an outline or a base roadmap of how to decide which things stay and which things go. And this is why you need to take a deeper look into what is meaningful to you, what brought you to this sort of minimalist, curious place. And this is where you'll be really articulating your priorities in life. That's the sort of outline, and that is what your roadmap will be based on. This is where you'll do some high-level goal setting, being really honest with yourself about what your challenges are. Like, do you feel as though you just don't have the time to do this? Or is it not really about the time, you just say it is, it's actually the fear of the emotions will come, excuse me, a fear of the emotions that will come up if you do. Or if time really is truly precious to you and that's an issue, you may find that the perception that you just don't have the time to do this work was actually born from a misunderstanding how much time you'll gain in the future. So it's very easy to make this analogous to a savings account, right? $10 today buy you something you really, really want right now. You get your instant gratification. Or you could take that $10, put it in a savings account, compound interest do its work, and then suddenly at some point down the road, maybe not with today's interest rates, but then you end up with $100, right? So I know even if this isn't your biggest challenge, finding the time, making the time to do this is difficult, but the time savings in the future is so big that I can guarantee you it's worth it. And I do believe that for most people, time is our most precious resource. And in that way, in that sense, it is our most meaningful resource because of what we can do with it. And then I would add that visualizing your new improved life. So, the outline of what this looks like might be a little more bare bones, but you really want to color that in to give yourself a full picture of what you want to feel like and how you want to experience life moving forward. So the consideration here is to look at your priorities and goals and challenges. And here's another keyword, honestly. So look at these things honestly so you can visualize what you want to design your life to look like. And honestly, this is the fun part. This is where you can get creative. Again, your minimalist life, your minimalist home does not need to have the minimalist design aesthetic, right? Be very colorful. It can feel really full. So visualizing this and making it your own really keys back in to your definition of minimalism and zero waste and how you want to apply it. I want to do a quick sort of side note here that I think is important since we've talked about landfills and started to talk about the process of downsizing. There's something that I have found common with a lot of my clients, and that is the creation of what I would call like landfill purgatory, right? So the good news is a lot of people don't want to put things in the landfill. We're starting from a great place here. But if you're essentially keeping what otherwise would be trash in your home because you feel bad about putting it in the landfill, because maybe you even do aspire to be zero waste or you even just want to lower the amount of waste you contribute. Let me say that you won't be doing yourself or the environment a favor by keeping these items, because what this means is you're kind of ignoring the problem. So what would be better is to have a conversation with yourself. And this is where meaning comes in again, a real conversation. You could say, geez, look at all these freebies I got from conferences I went to. I don't need them. There's really nothing I can do with them because they all have some sort of promotional tag on them. They're kind of useless items. I might be able to recycle some of them, but otherwise they have to go in the landfill. What a great lesson I learned here. So switching it from guilt and feeling bad and just keeping essentially what is trash in your home that will be trash at some point in the future, where it is not being used at all. You're able to turn that around to a teaching moment for yourself. And it really, really instills in a way that I can't do for you talking on the screen right now. But when you're in your home and you're picking up these items and there's no other way, nothing else you can do with it, and you wish you hadn't picked it up, or maybe it's not something you regret having, but it is done. Don't keep it in your home just to avoid having to put it in the trash can. Accept the fact that it is going to go to the landfill, because that is a moment that you can kinetically remember the next time you purchase something or pick up something free that will end up there as well. And you don't want to experience that feeling again. So another thing you can say to yourself is, this is broken, it's irreparable, maybe it's been damaged, the water damage or other types of damage in your home. Nothing is really salvageable here. I hate putting it into the landfill, but when I acquire something the next time, I'm going to consider what materials it's made from and make sure that I can recycle them, reuse them, repurpose them in some way, or that somebody else can, or that it can be easily donated. So the point is both to avoid the landfill, but not to avoid it to a point where you're actually burying your head in the sand of your own home and not acknowledging where there are some items that need to go to the landfill and moving on and using that as a teaching moment for yourself. And what I touched on there was guilt. And guilt comes up a lot during this process. To make minimalism meaningful, you have to deal with the guilt that might come up. This is one of the emotional pieces. We're not going to get to all of the emotions that come up, but I wanted to focus on guilt this time. You may have guilt that comes with the items you bought that you wish you hadn't, so you're feeling guilty about it. Maybe it's something you view as a mistake. Unrealized hobbies you bought stuff for, but you never really got into that hobby, but you believe you will one day, but you haven't for 10 years. Things that maybe you were supposed to return, but forgot to, and just kind of like, it just sits there gnawing at you. Things you bought, never wore, things you have from someone who passed away, maybe someone you really cared about, and you feel like there's something wrong with getting rid of that item. Something your mother-in-law gave you, and you're afraid if she comes over, she's gonna be really mad. And I'm not giving mother-in-laws a hard time, but you know, we get things from our loved ones, and then we feel like we have to have them on display. So let me say that keeping something you do not want, do not like, will not use, does not help anyone. Another way of thinking about it is that keeping it is almost like a small lie that you're telling yourself. And we're talking about honesty. Minimalism, zero waste, this is about honesty and getting real. So when guilt comes up, I suggest replacing it with gratitude. So acknowledge when it comes up, but you can say, you know, I'm so lucky to have had a chance to learn that hobby. Now I realize that it's not for me, so I can let it go. And that releases a certain weight. Or, that's so sweet that somebody left this for me when they passed away, and I really love and care about them. I kept one of the items they left me, but I don't need all of them. They don't live in the items. And I know that, you know, this person bought me this gift, and I know it made them happy to do that. I'm so grateful that they cared so much about me. And then when you go through that process, then take action. Because that item that you're holding on because of guilt is made worse by the fact that it can be used by somebody else, that you can release this weight in your life. And it might also release other negative emotions or bad memories, and it could be sold, and the money could be used for something more important to you. And if you're feeling really guilty, you could sell it and then donate the money somewhere. And since we're getting a little bit more into the practical notion here, because no matter how much we're talking about meaningfulness, if you don't know how to make this all happen in a way that's meaningful, it's not going to go anywhere. So let me mention a few practical things that you can do when letting go of items and doing it in a meaningful way. If the item itself is not meaningful to you. So where does it all go? Where does it all go? Use some options. There are what seems like a new app every day where you can sell or trade or donate items. So there's apps, there's eBay, there's Craigslist, there are a million places online that will help negotiate stuff for sale. And these are great if you're trying to sell to get money that you will then use for another one of your other priorities. That's the best way to do it. You can also give to people in your community. Services like nothing groups are incredible. I mean, here in Austin, my goodness, I see posts for that all the time, and it's a great way to know your neighbors. So if something that's meaningful to you is being a part of the community, this is a great way to infuse meaning into that action. You can donate to organizations, and this can save you a lot of time. So selling and giving away individual items can be a little time consuming, but if you want to save time, you can pick centers that take a lot of different items. So you have less sorting to do and a lot less work for each individual item. Reuse, repair, these are great for your zero waste goals. Austin Creative Reuse is a wonderful place for that. There's a shoe hospital. I mean, there's so many resources in Austin. I didn't really have time to actually list all of them here. And then there's also so many recycling solutions, both in Austin, as I mentioned before, and then occasionally online, especially when it comes to electronics reuse and recycling, which sometimes you are able to get some money for that as well. Another note here again on the practical side of things is to be careful to not let doing the perfect job of letting go be the enemy of the good. And this is something that comes up a lot. And being conscientious is sort of what I'm talking about here. I'm encouraging that, but you can get so conscientious that you sort of miss the forest for the trees. So the main goal here is to avoid the landfill and to make choices based on your roadmap of priorities. The outline of your goals and also how it connects to meaning, as we discussed earlier. But if you become so fixated on an item that was once precious to you, that it has to go to just the right person who's going to love and appreciate it as much as you did, or you just think it's such a great thing that somebody should have it, then you're spinning your wheels and spending a lot of time, energy, and effort that doesn't need to be spent. Maybe that can easily go to one of the donation organizations that you selected. So keep that in mind. Don't lose sight of your purpose. And then the flip side here of meaning, again, this little warning, is we're talking so much about meaning, but also be careful that you don't find too much meaning in an object, in a thing, that you end up facilitating attachment to things, right? So an item can be imbued with meaning. It can be imbued with emotion. And we have to be able to take a step back from that, even as we seek meaning, to ensure that we're not just keeping things that we believe intrinsically have meaning. So these are just a few examples of how to implement minimalism and zero waste, a couple of potential obstacles that you might come across. Only have 45 minutes to chat, so that's the best I can do in a short bit. But I want to leave you with one last framing for all of this, and that is the stuff in your life. And remember, I'm not just talking about things like physical objects. I'm talking about calendars, to-dos, relationships, everything. But the stuff in your life are the tools to engage in the things that matter to you. And that's it. And that doesn't mean that they all need to be highly functional, but it is important to think of them as tools. And they do need to have an active, that's another keyword, an active and meaningful purpose. So it could be a piece of artwork that is meaningful to you, that you look at every day, that inspires you every day. So that's not a tool in terms of a lot of functionality, but it is a tool in terms of what it provides for you in an active way. So that's a tool. But a bunch of framed artwork that you like, that's been sitting on the floor of your closet for 3 years. I know people in the audience right now have some of those. That's not a useful tool. That's the difference. So having a life of tools that have meaningful purposes is what minimalism and zero waste is all about. So I've done a fair amount of talking. Thank you all for sticking with me. I have found that it is very easy to get jazzed about something and excited and, oh yeah, minimalism sounds great, I'm going to do this, zero waste, blah, blah, blah. And then you're going to wake up the next morning, you're going to have the same to-do list, you're going to have the same stuff around you, and you're going to feel just as overwhelmed. So what can you do to take a step forward? I'm going to offer up a challenge, or actually a few challenges for you. Feel free to create your own for yourself. The important thing is that you begin to take action sort of immediately. So one of the challenges I suggest is writing down, and you can, instead of writing down, if that's not really your method of discovery, you could talk to a friend or a partner about this. Write down about at least one area in your life where your stuff or a thing you spend a lot of time on is not in line with your priorities or your values. It's not meaningful. This could be something that's small or large. Just pick one. Do that investigation, highlight it. Taking this a step further, find one item in your home that is meaningful to you, that you care about, and find a way to more prominently and actively use it, display it, or just interact with it in some way. See what that does. See if that changes anything. And that's not a leading question. You're not supposed to answer that in a certain way. It really is an inquiry for yourself. Because remember, the context of all of this are questions for you to ask and investigate for yourself. So find that item, and then find another item that makes you feel bad. That makes you bad in some way. It could be a bad memory, it could be guilt that comes up, it could be shame. And let it go in the most meaningful and possibly, if you can, zero waste method as possible. But also take, and again, investigation, take deep notice of what you learn from this action. And these little challenges, are not going to make you a minimalist, right? Maybe you get rid of one or two things or use some things differently. But it's experimenting. It's creating a little pathway in your brain for how this works so it doesn't become as daunting for you. So I'll pause there and actually let me I know we're about to start Q&A, but just to give you a quick sense of resources, since I can't cover everything this evening, I do lead a Meaningful Minimalism Meetup group. So if you go on meetup.com, you can find us. And just a great way of building community around minimalism, which is often a solitary sport when you're just getting rid of your stuff. So great resources there. I also have a podcast. Natalie mentioned before, I'm a podcaster, Words for Wednesday. It's a very short podcast, 5 minutes or less. I talk about mindfulness, creativity, and philosophy. It's all a part of a minimalism journey. And then I would really, really love for you to stay in touch with me. Like I said, we're going to do Q&A now, but if you have questions that I wasn't able to address, here's my email address. Just shoot me a quick email if you feel more comfortable on Facebook or Instagram. This is my handle. You can DM me or find other resources there. And this is my website. I have many years of blog posts that you can scroll through and an ebook. So those are just some ways for us to stay in touch. And I just wanted to remind everyone to build your life around meaning and forget about the rest. And that's all.
Thank you so much, Dara. That was great. We have a few questions in the box. The first one we got was about any ideas of where to reuse, repurpose, recycle old VHS tapes.
Yep, this is a tough one. And Natalie, you might know better than I around Austin. You know, my first guess is possibly Austin Creative Reuse because they take a lot of old items or items that can be used for different purposes. And if those VHS tapes are still usable, you might, if they're, you know, strong titles that people are still interested in watching, there are people who still have VHS recorders, you could possibly sell them or donate them online.
Awesome. Yeah, really nothing to add to that. That's pretty much your option. What are some favorite resources that you recommend to help weigh your zero waste choices and trade-offs?
So one resource that I've enjoyed is Trash is for Tossers. It's a blog by a woman who actually began a zero waste shop in New York City. And that can be a good way of looking at weighing some of those options because she's been doing this for a long time. And also looking at Austin Resource Recovery's list of items that they take will help you sort of preemptively decide, okay, if this, you know, finishes its useful life with me, is there even a way to recycle this responsibly? Because sometimes we think things can be recycled, but they can't be. So having some confirmation there can be useful. Overall, you're just looking for items, you know, a shorthand is don't use plastic. If you can at least cut that out, that gets you pretty far. And that's only one decision that you have to make. Reusables are just always an easy way to make sure that you're not being wasteful. And making sure that if you're getting something that's compostable, that you have a plan for composting. Because sometimes I do see, let's say, takeout containers that are compostable, but there are no bins near them, or potentially where you're going next, it allows you to compost. So it's sort of like a thinking through where something's going to go. But again, a shorthand that I really like is just trying to avoid plastic. And then you know that things will just be a little bit easier, and making sure you have reusable things for things that you do on a regular basis.
We had one question about getting those contacts that you mentioned at the end again. So maybe if you could pull that slide up.
Oh yeah,
while we answer the next couple.
Yeah.
So people could jot that down. And then we had a question about, oh, go ahead.
I'm not sure how to go back in the slide.
The like backwards arrow, maybe. Oh. That would work. I don't know. Or up sometimes works. But I don't think I can control it, unfortunately. If not, then I can post that in the chat as you talk.
Thanks.
Yeah. The next question we had was about like digital tools and minimalism. So Uvanesh said, how do you do digital minimalism? For example, I don't want to give away my books and simply get ebooks in their place.
Sorry, so the question is how to do digital minimalism? Or I didn't catch that.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they mean, you know, getting like doing minimalism without digital products, or like how you incorporate digital products in your approach.
Okay. So that's
they said they don't want to give away their books and only get ebooks.
Right. Okay, I see. So this is where we're going to circle back to meaning, right? So I'll just use a handy example because I see it in the back here. I have a guitar here. If you had a guitar and you never play guitar, you shouldn't have a guitar. That's not minimalism. But if you play guitar and you have a guitar and you love the guitar and that's something important in your life, then that is minimalism. Maybe not having 50 guitars, but that's what we're talking about here. So if you love books are very important to you, and you want to read books, having them in physical copy versus digital copy because you don't like the digital copy, that's minimalism. Now, we can get into another conversation about what books to keep. I mean, I don't suggest keeping books that you've already read and that you could get at the library if you ever needed to read again. I generally feel that if you're going to keep books, keeping books that are reference materials, books that you haven't read yet, but that you're going to read, and that's another key point there, because a lot of times we have books that we will never read, and so let's not be dishonest with ourselves about that. And then, of course, like a couple of, special beloved books that maybe have an inscription or that for sure you'll read again. So be very mindful in paring down your collection of books. But if you are somebody that wants to read books in hard copy versus digital, then that is what minimalism will look like for you. So the digital world might be physically small, but it can be just as disorganized and just as fraught with problems. So I don't believe that making everything digital solves for minimalism. It's just one of the tools that you can use.
Awesome. And then we had a question about sharing tools and equipment, like what to do if someone needs a wheelbarrow once every 3 years.
So there is a company that I haven't used yet, so I don't want to, say too much about them. But there is a company in Austin and I think elsewhere called Ruckify that allows people to rent items, just like what you're describing, something that you would only need every once in a while. And there may also be some tool libraries in Austin that I'm not specifically aware of or that might be created soon. But basically you want to find companies or community solutions that allow you to rent something. And while I can't say for sure that you'll be able to find this through the Buy Nothing groups, because they really are typically for asking for something or giving something away, sometimes people use it as a way of sharing. So if you just needed temporarily something, you might be able to find it through a Buy Nothing group. I've definitely done that before. So I really like that question though, because I think, especially with things we already have, even if we only use them every few years, if we already have it, we're more likely to keep it and invent reasons to use it. So that's really a great question because there's something behind it, right? There's like not wanting to buy things that you don't need as often. There's ways of building community, because really this is all about like asking someone to borrow a cup of sugar, right? Like in the olden days. So getting to know your neighbors for things like that, using services, and then of course not allowing these sort of perfect thing at the perfect moment scenarios to prevent us from giving things away that we don't really need on a regular basis.
Great. And Margaret says in the chat that she has loaned her wheelbarrow numerous times to neighbors through Buy Nothing. So.
Oh, that's wonderful. Okay, I'm glad what I said was true. It's really a wonderful community resource. Mm-hmm.
And then we have time for one more question. I think we have one more question, so that's perfect. When trying to support family members who have expressed interest in a more minimalist lifestyle, but have essentially lived as semi-hoarders, how can we keep nudging them forward when we see them regressing? What can we say when we see them making poor choices?
That is not an easy question to answer. So I'll kind of give a sort of an overview. One thing, let me actually tell a quick story to illuminate this point. Working with clients, I have often had couples, or families that I would work with. And anytime I have, one of the partners would always say to me privately, he just will not get rid. He's like obsessed with, these tools, and I just can't get him to get rid of it. It's just like, it's ridiculous. They want me to be on their side, right? Because it's driving them crazy that their partner doesn't realize what they're doing. And then the other one will come to me later. "Oh, she's just, you wouldn't believe the things that she keeps. I mean, who needs 10 of these or 12 of these?" So I only tell that story because, first of all, it is common, it is consistent. We tend to not understand what other people value if it's not what we value. And so there's a little bit of judgment there. And so when dealing with somebody in your family that has different values than you, on top of whatever other issues that led them to the point of having a lot of things, sometimes it's part and parcel to, you know, how they were brought up or what their concerns or fears are, to handle it with a lot of softness, and to really create a no judgment zone and a conversation where there's no sense of I'm doing things the right way, you're doing things the wrong way, because that's always where the conflict arises. And the other thing is to investigate, and not knowing this particular situation, but I'm going to make a broader statement because this might come up for others, is to investigate, are we talking about someone who just has the basic emotional attachments and holds on to too many things, or is kind of disorganized, or doesn't prioritize getting rid of things? That's kind of one generalized bucket. Or is this individual having very intense emotional issues, dealing with a lot, maybe even in the mental health category, and that's a different bucket. And sort of understanding where somebody is going to really relate to what you end up talking about. Because if it's in the latter of the two, the conversation isn't about the stuff. The stuff is the outward facing, externalized piece of what's going on internally with that person. And so if you try to address the stuff, you're never going to get anywhere because that's not what it's about. So those are a few, again, not knowing the exact situation, those are some pieces that I have found to be consistent with clients I've worked with, and that can be at least a starting place.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Dara. We are at time. I do see that we have at least one more question in the Q&A box. So I think you mentioned you were able to stay on a few minutes after and answer that. But we will officially close for everyone who has to go at 6 o'clock. Thank you so much for joining us. We will put in the chat a link to our survey, and then we'll also come in your email inbox. Again, we really value your opinion about how this event went and what you thought of it. And so we'd really appreciate your few minutes of time filling that out. We'd be really grateful. Also want to invite everyone to join the Circular Economy Program's next public event, which is going to be on February 2nd at 6 p.m. We are hosting the next Reverse Pitch opening event. So Reverse Pitch is an event the city has hosted for 5 years now. This will be our 6th. And it's where we invite businesses to pitch a byproduct material that they don't know what to do with. So kind of the business version of this. And then we invite entrepreneurs to come create business solutions for that. So it's always a really fun event. There will be networking afterwards, and we invite you to join that. We'll put links to that as well as to the survey in the chat. And again, thank you so much to everyone for taking time out of your evening to join us. We really appreciate it. And thank you for all that you're doing in your own lives to help Austin reach zero waste. And I'll go back to the Q&A to see what we might have missed. I think there was a question, is there a zero waste or green store in Austin that you frequent?
No, but I personally have done a lot of shopping at Wheatsville in terms of grocery stores. And there are other grocery stores like Whole Foods and Sprouts that offer bulk items that allow you to be zero waste, or that come in more zero waste type packaging. Just personally, I have done a fair amount of it at Wheatsville because they have some unique items that you can't always find as zero waste, like honey or like tamari or soy sauce or something. And they've obviously scaled back due to COVID, but I know that they have more recently started to allow you to bring in your own reusable containers, and they've opened up some of their bulk. So those are the only places locally that I use in terms of zero waste for grocery shopping. But then you can get like sort of like hygiene products there as well, like a bamboo toothbrush, which would also be considered zero waste. So I'm not sure, Natalie, if you have any others that you've been to, but that's been my experience. And I occasionally do order zero waste products online. And usually I don't want to order online because of the packaging, but when you order from a zero waste store, it comes in compostable packaging. So that's made the online purchasing experience when needed, when I can't get something locally, to be a bit easier.
I would just mention that we have a directory called the Austin Reuse Directory, which is a place to find your local thrift stores, places you can rent items, places you can shop for recycled content items. So that's just austinreusedirectory.com. And that way you can find whatever's closest to you. And within that, there's also a separate directory that our sustainability office hosts called the Green Business Directory, which is also hosted on the Austin Common. So they're kind of like next to each other there. And that will give you places that have no plastic packaging and that kind of thing. So that's something to check out. And I don't see any other questions in the chat. I guess we just had that one extra. We saw someone also noticed that auto parts stores often rent tools. So that might be a resource for some folks. Yeah. And otherwise, if people do have questions, as Dara said, she's offered to answer questions via email or social media. And thank you all once again for joining tonight's session.
Thank you.